Before we go into the podcast, I want to just talk about a business that I've set up with my friend George. It is called the Podcast Introduction Group. So if you want to join and be able to be featured on 24 to 48 podcasts to be able to reach an amazing audience, this is the place you need to go to. Podcast, being a guest on podcasts, is automatically establishing you as an authority and is able to build your personal and professional brand. We handpick of a bank of podcasters that we have to be able to grow your business and brand. We do 100% of everything that needs to be done by my team. You do not need to lift a finger. You are able to expose yourself to new and relevant markets by going on other people's podcasts. You also are able to create brand loyalty. People will love listening to you and coming back to your products or services, and it's able to increase your revenue. So if you want to be able to get involved, you can sign up quickly, registered with an account manager. There's an onboarding call where we target the podcasts that you want to be on, the type that you want, whether it's entrepreneurship, business, health, fitness, whatever it is. We then match you to those podcasts and you can start your journey. We have regular catch-ups with our account managers, and Google ranks you when people search for you. So when people are searching for you, you're able to see your podcasts at the top of the list. So if you are interested in being a podcast guest on multiple podcasts, we are the place to go. If you go to podcastintroduction.com and go and register your details, we will have a quick call with you, match your podcast that you want to be on, and we can then start this process ASAP. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Back onto the podcast then. Just one last thing before we go into the podcast. I just wanted to talk to you about the fact that I have a YouTube channel that has been going for quite some time, and I am recording and releasing all of my interviews with some short videos as well on YouTube. So please do check it out. YouTube on Absolute Business Mindset. You'll see a bunch of interviews there, all the longer format interviews and some short videos as well. So please enjoy that. And here goes with the podcast interview. Today we have Shawn Khorrami, who is an author, a scaling expert, and serial entrepreneur. Hello, Shawn. How are you today?
Wonderful. I'm really glad to be here. Very, very excited, actually.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. I'm really looking forward to this. Really interesting. A lot of my listeners are entrepreneurs and business owners, so there's going to be a lot of sort of relevance to what you've done. And I'm really interested to talk about the sort of starting businesses versus scaling businesses. So we'll hopefully cover that in the conversation as well. But as we always start on the podcast is called the Absolute Business Mindset. What does a business mindset mean to you?
You know, I think the first place is focus. The second place is really resiliency. And these are not, the way I look at things is I start from where you are inside, you know, and how you're thinking about things. Much more, I focus on that much more than I do skill set, education, all of those other things, because all of those other things, one, you can acquire them. Two, there are lots of people that have them. And so where you really compete and when you really can exceed is exactly what you said. The question, where the question was, where your mindset is, and your mindset has to be in a place of focus in my mind and a place of resiliency, because things will come about that you're going to have to deal with. And the people that sit there and deal with those things and see them through, I believe, put themselves in the best position to succeed.
And so you run different businesses and you've got employees. What's the difference for you between an employee and an entrepreneur?
That's a very interesting question. So I think an entrepreneur is someone who actually takes the chance and has to believe in themselves and has to be looking much more into the future. That's one place. And a lot of times, I respect everyone's, personality, everyone's way of wanting to live. So I believe that it's just different personalities. One personality is where you need that direction, you need some sort of leadership, you prefer that, let's put it that way. And also in terms of financial budgeting, you're going to want a more structured type of life where you're getting a paycheck, or you can rely on planning that kind of way. Whereas in terms of an entrepreneur, it's a different mindset. Again, you're kind of betting on yourself. You're betting on the market. You're betting on the come. You're looking into the future. You're willing to forego a lot of things in order to get something that you see is coming later on. And again, these are things sort of I talk about in terms of personality, more than specific business techniques or types of concepts.
Yeah, I think so. I've hired a few people. I worked corporate for 14 years, then started businesses, which I now run. And it definitely, I've fallen foul previously with hiring people on a skill set, not a mindset. And it's not always fallen through, but it does fall through, because the mindset is the stuff that you can't, as you've spoken of, you can't teach that. People that have the right mindset will succeed. They can learn a skill set at how to do certain things. But I've struggled with that previously, thinking that I need someone to hit the ground running because they know how to do that. They haven't got the right mindset. They're not the right type of people for the business. And therefore I've struggled there. Does that sort of reflect on your sort of experiences?
No, frankly, that's an exact conversation to the extent I'm involved in the hiring process where I'm actually interviewing someone. That's actually a conversation that I have. Because time and again, what happens is someone will come and immediately start talking to you about their skill set, the things they've done, the experiences they've had, the ways they can handle different jobs. And that's absolutely important. There's no question about that. But a lot of times I'll stop that and I'll say, hang on. For me, it really matters who you are, and what kind of person you are, because to me, what I need is that kind of mindset. And frankly, how you're going to, since I'm interviewing you, you're going to be going back and forth with me to the extent we start working together, and how we sort of mesh together, how culturally you mesh with the company that you're interviewing to be a part of. And then we can get to your skill set, because if you don't have that beginning thing of that kind of mindset, then to me, it doesn't matter what skill sets you have. You're not going to be able to fit in. It's just not going to work. That's been by and large my experience.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I totally agree. Tell me one thing about your upbringing which reflects who you are now.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hi, I'm Alex, the host of X Health Show. Meet the future of healthcare. Think X-Men, that's X Health. Actual superheroes behind programming living cells to cure cancer once and for all. Tech that detects preterm delivery in seconds, brain-computer interface, or apps that employ AI to match you, your disease, with the best treatment. X Health Show brings to you visionaries who push the boundaries of healthcare from Switzerland, the heart of Europe, and the most innovative country in the world. Let me introduce you to their startups. Head to X Health Show, meet the future of healthcare. Happy to greet you there.
Geez. There are lots of things. The funny thing is, we'll be talking about this later, I'm sure, but I'm right now writing my second book, and part of the beginning process, the beginning chapters of that book are actually experiences that I had as a child. That sort of reflected as I grew up and really guide what I do in business. So it's a very interesting question that you bring up, and one that I've been kind of working on. I look at events that occurred. One, I'm an immigrant. So I came from Iran. I was born there. I had a lot of my younger years there. And then because of the Iranian Revolution, my family decided to immigrate to the US. That experience of just being in one country and then immigrating to the next, and the cultural changes that occurred, that significantly shaped how I look at the world, period. And it shaped, here's one thing it did. And it's funny because if you were in my office right now, you'd look up at the wall right here. I'd show you something I made from some stuff I did as a child. But it helped me see perspectives, vastly different perspectives. The Iranian government, some of the culture of the time being very opposed to the way the U.S. was thinking, both politically and culturally. And then moving to the U.S., experiencing the way that the U.S. population kind of felt toward where I was coming from, what I was, in terms of nationality and culturally, and then seeing what that perspective was. And the thing I was I'm pointing to a wall of my office here. It's because years later, what I did was I'm kind of a dork, I guess. I collected stamps, and for exactly 1 year, I collected baseball cards out here.
Right.
And so. But the stamps, I had a collection of Iranian stamps and a collection of American stamps. I still do. And so one thing I did was I had some of them framed. The funny thing was the way they ended up working was I looked at different stamps, for example, regarding the American embassy in Iran, when the Iranians took the American hostages. In Iran, it was viewed as some political thing where there was going to be espionage down there, and they were just stopping that. And so the way the Iranians looked at it was a completely different thing. There's a commemorative stamp sitting on my wall that shows the way they were thinking, how they were right in taking these hostages. And then on the U.S. side, you have a completely different thing. There's just different ways. And so, and then I had another set of stamps framed where in Iran, for example, there's Arbor Day and various things that we celebrate as well around the world, right? Things where we were completely looking at things differently, diametrically differently, and things where we were very much alike. So that, as an overall thing, that concept of being able to look at people where they're in extreme positions, opposing each other, and how to be able to sort of digest that, see that, and then try to maneuver within that. Has, in my mind, been extremely helpful. One, in mending fences, in getting people to work together, getting different things, getting through different situations. But two, also in being able to look at things objectively, being able to understand, or let's put it this way, walking in another person's shoes, being really, truly being able to do that and turning and saying, okay, I see where they may feel a certain way or think a certain way. How do I deal with that? Which is something that I think a lot of us should have more of, particularly in business.
Yeah, culture for a business. So I worked for corporate for 14 years, and it was interesting working for two different companies. The different cultures, even though they were exactly the same industry, but the different cultures that each of the companies had was really impactful on the employees, and one being better than the other. So I think culture is something that actually, as an entrepreneur, as a business, or more a business owner, you should be working to build the best culture that you can. And that's probably why things like, I'm going to use McDonald's as an example, as a franchise, but they set their culture very early on and how they wanted. Now, I've never worked for McDonald's, so that's completely like disclaimer. I've no idea if it's a good place or a bad place to work, but you can see that they have all the same uniforms. They have the whole setup exactly the same. They do a certain process for the business, and that's how they do that. And so I think building culture, it brings confidence for certain employees as well. They feel a loyalty, a brand loyalty to companies. So that a long way to ask the question, how do you think building culture within companies is important, and how do you view that, and how do you do that to be successful?
So, just as a very general thing, number one, without culture, you're going to have a very tough time growing a company. That's just number one. But number two, you mentioned some things with McDonald's. Oh, how they have the same uniforms, and they sort of build in all of those things. They kind of brand all of that in there. Yeah. They, at the same time, what they also do is sort of they kind of walk a line between people's individualities and their thought processes and things like that versus being just part of the team, almost. So it's not running an army. Let's put it that way, where you're just sitting there and saying, you take orders, the subordinate takes the order of the superior, and we all wear the same uniform, and this is what we do. When I tell you, you march on. I think it's important to understand when you're running a business, and the culture of that business is not having an army. And a lot of times people look at McDonald's and they say, oh, look, they're running an army. They absolutely are not. So one thing that I see in small and medium-sized businesses, people who start businesses, they look at it that way. And I a lot of times start sort of directing them to say, yes, absolutely. It has to be about a belief system. There has to be a way of looking at things, a way of functioning in the office, a way of interacting with each other, procedures, protocols, all of those things. But at the same time, you have to respect some level of individuality. You have to respect people's personalities and their respective cultures as well. So that's again, I'm really talking in generalities. As a general rule, that's something that I see where I sort of try to direct it. But what you said, it's incredibly important. I don't think you can run a company without having, actually developing that culture.
Absolutely. What was your first business?
Wow. Okay. So we're going to go back to my childhood again, right?
Go for it. Yeah.
So, things that shaped me. Things that shaped me was when I was a kid. My dad in Iran had a construction company, and in any developing country, that's usually a good business to be in because they're developing infrastructure. So there's a lot of contracts and government involvement in those things. So my dad had a construction company, and he did something that probably would not be accepted with a kid today. But as a 6 and 7 and 8 year old, he would take me to construction sites where I would be able to interact with these different things. So the first experience that I had was seeing my dad run his business, both at the office and at the construction sites. So both in terms of a business and in terms of the substantive work that's being done. And I always thought I would get into construction. That was my dream. I loved it because I got to crawl all over these construction equipment, bulldozers and what have you, as a little child. And at the same time, it was what my dad did. It was a big deal to me. Well, we moved over here. My dad was never able to reconstruct his construction business, really. As you might imagine, a 45, 50-year-old guy going to a different country, different economy, different language. Very difficult. But he was able to get his hands on a couple of small income properties. And what I saw as a teenager, as a 14, 15-year-old, was my dad really struggling to manage these things. And it was a cultural issue too, right? The way you would do something like that in Iran was vastly different. The way you would, even in a small setting like that, vastly different than what you do in the US. And at the time, getting professional management wasn't really an option for him. And so it was when computers were coming into homes, personal computers. And what I did was I constructed a really basic, keep going back to construction, see, a really basic database program. I created it, plus a system for managing those kinds of buildings, just to help my dad. So quite by accident was how it kind of started. It was just helping my dad. And then my dad turns around and says, I got a bunch of friends that are in the same boat as me, and they could use what you're doing here. So as a 16-year-old, I ended up marketing to my dad's friends. Those became my first customers. Wow. And there began my first business, managing property. So it wasn't construction as I had dreamed it would be, but it did involve construction because there's various things you have to do with those buildings, and it did involve a lot of management. So a lot of the business stuff I would see my dad do, I kind of tried to apply them, and that's where it went.
Marvelous. Amazing. And then I'm just going to sort of move us along the journey. So you did a degree in maths, economics and computers, which you'd had the business experience, but from my reading, my research, you said you wanted to get a degree there as well. But then you came out of that and you didn't go to a tech software company to work. You started a business.
Yeah, I was stage one. Like you said, I for whatever reason really believe in formal education. Have always believed in formal education. So I got rid of my business. I sold it off, and I went into college. By the way, let me preface this a little bit. As I've developed, I've noticed that by no means is a formal education a guarantee to success in life or in business. Okay. So by no means am I saying that's a necessity. But for me, getting that kind of overall theoretical view and cramming of information into my brain was important. So yeah, I went and got degrees in mathematics, economics, computers. One thing, by the way, okay, so I got a law degree. I also went and got a formal education in marketing, sales, and accounting. When you add all these together, it's really the backbones of running a business. Yeah. It wasn't about being in a tech business or in a construction business. It was about being in business. So that's when you look at the overall picture, that's where it goes. But the other thing was that the funny thing is I was, at the time, I was one of the only kids in a typing class when I was in high school, because what I noticed was I was working on this personal computer doing my database program. And I said, this typing thing is important and it's going to become even more important. So I actually formally went to typing class in high school at the time, which was a very strange course to take, frankly, very strange course for them to still offer. But I did that. So computers, it was for me, it was something that, again, was a necessity to do business in my head. It wasn't, okay, I'm going to go get a job programming, whatever thing. That wasn't at all a thought in my head. So yeah, absolutely. All of it was sort of set that way. As I was going through college, I had classmates that would come and say, I want to do my resume and do this, and go into that industry and get a job here with this company or that. That never occurred with me. And then the funny thing is I never noticed that until a few years ago. Something came up and I turned to my wife and I said, I've never done a resume. I've never done a resume. Ever. I've done bios, so, you'll see my bio all over the place, but I've never done a resume because I've never held a job, in a company that I haven't had ownership interest in. So I've never gotten a W-2. Well, in the U.S. we get W-2s for tax purposes. If you're an employee, never done that. And by the way, you mentioned something that I bring up with people from time to time. You worked in certain industries and then you went and started your own businesses. Yeah. Okay. Where I believe I have a shortcoming and I've worked a lot on, is I've never been in that position of being an employee. So I've had board members. I've had that kind of boss, investors type of people that you have to report to, but I've never had a direct boss that says, okay, now go do this project. Now go do that. I've never been in that position. And it took a little bit of doing, partially from my wife, to say, hey, when you talk to someone, or when you give instruction to someone, where you do this or the other, you have to understand where they're coming from. Because I didn't understand that. I didn't understand what it means for your boss to say, hey, you're not doing this right. I want you to do this. Or I didn't understand how that feels to an employee. So I ended up doing a lot, getting formal education as well, but also sort of working and reading and thinking about exactly how it is, how I interact with employees. That's something that came about kind of, as not as a result of getting on the job experience from that side of it, but from actually educating myself.
Awesome. I think I think for me, I enjoyed corporate life to a point, but definitely felt there was something more that I wanted to achieve, and felt that it was a point of marker that I wanted to do it myself rather than make money for other people. So for me,
Yeah.
and there was life happened, and it made the choice to be able to do it possible as well as preferable. So I think that I wouldn't necessarily tell people that they should go into a corporate job or into a job, but I really subscribe to the sort of Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. If you're going to do a job, and I didn't do this, but if you're going to do a job, have it contribute to what you want to do the business in the future. So if you want to run a business, sales and marketing is absolutely integral. So maybe you do a job as a sales and marketing consultant or someone to build that knowledge to be able to then add to your business further down the line.
Yeah, that comes up with some frequency. I do quite a bit of mentoring, and a lot of times you'll see someone come in. Both, I mean, I even mentor business owners. I mean, that's part of what I do, what I've done for many years. But also in terms of just young people coming out of school, or some school that I'm affiliated with, they send me students. One thing that you hear a lot of times, hey, I want to do this because it makes X amount of dollars. I want to do that because, and a lot of times you don't hear what I sort of look for. And by the way, it goes to that mindset too, that we talked about at the beginning. Yeah. What I look for, which is, hey, I want to do this because in 5 years, I want to be getting like some sort of a strategic plan of where they're going. In 5 years, I want to be here. I want to get into this kind of business. I want to be in this industry. That kind of mindset where you're sort of planning out what you're going to be doing 5 years, 10 years, 20 years into the future, where you want to be, the kind of work you want to be doing, how your day you want it to look like, what is it that you want your day to be like. And also, I also never counsel anyone to start a business or not start a business. I never push them into that, because you go back to that personality. I always tell them, don't feel like it's a shortcoming, whether you go work at a company or whether you start a business. It's a matter of personality. It's a matter of how you want your life, how you want your days to be, how you want a lot of things to be. And so don't think in terms of, oh, if I don't go start a business, I'm just an employee, this or badly about that, or the other way around. It really is a matter of what your personality is, what you enjoy doing. And I think you should play toward your personality and what you want to do. And you see how we keep going back to less experience, less formal education, but making these decisions based on who you are as a person. And then getting into your skill set and then developing skill set around it is the way I just keep going back to that. The way I look at it.
I think so. I experienced people in corporate who worked there for 30 years, and I think there was certain elements of, I wish I might have moved on to try something different, but equally they really respected the company, enjoyed working for the company, loved it, and therefore their skill set fitted that they would never start a business. They wanted to be an entrepreneur, they wanted to be an employee, and they really respected working for a big company, having the brand, having the respect. And there's lots of things that you get for working with a corporate that you don't get with being an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
So I do think personalities, we keep on coming back to this loop. Personalities really play to whether you want to be an employee or a business owner. Yeah. But I want to move this on. I want to move this on and ask you a question about risk. What do you think your risk tolerance is?
Oh, yeah. The funny thing is I was going to actually add to what you were saying before, and it goes into what you're asking now.
Okay, excellent.
So over time, what I noticed was, so we're talking about personalities. What I noticed was, as I grow a business and it gets 7, 8, 9 figures, it gets to a certain stage, and I a little bit lose interest in that business, and that's when I sort of want to plan an exit. And what I noticed was that's the stage where the risk goes away in my head. Okay, because to me, when a business gets large enough, a couple of things happen. You're going to have a whole lot of stakeholders in there, and those stakeholders have a lot of interest in propping up the business. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it, in the fact that they just need to make sure that business succeeds, because people have money in it. You have investors that need to be, that need to be made whole. So there is a lot of different stakeholders that are trying to make sure that business survives. So big businesses, to me, have, in my mind, have less risk, not more risk, in that way. 2, decision making becomes clunky, because again, you have those stakeholders, right? And so it becomes a less nimble business. So a lot of times you'll hear even big businesses, sort of people complain about that. Oh, geez, we became clunky. You go to Facebook, move fast and break things, right? Move fast and break things are not an option anymore for Facebook, right? And that becomes the recipe for disaster at a certain point. So when that goes away in my head, I kind of lose interest in the business, and a lot of people are that way, I've noticed. So I'm a big risk taker, and that's why I concentrate on small and medium sized businesses. That's what excites me. I want to be a partner in the business. I don't even want to do consulting with it. I want to be a partner in there. When I interview someone and I say, hey, I'm trying to see if we can work together. What I'm really looking at, and I tell them right up front, is I want a robust relationship. I don't want to just sit there and give you advice on this and the other. I want to be involved in the business. I want to help it grow. I want to be involved in that part of it. I want to be part of that risk. I want to invest in it and push it forward and help it grow. So I tend to have a great tolerance for risk. By the way, I'll give you an example. My wife is exactly the opposite. My wife is the type of person who's the employee, right? She'll work in my company, right? But she'll expect her paycheck. She'll expect that kind of a thing, and in her mind, that is the way life should be. That's the way she likes her life. So we have this dichotomy where I'm taking huge risk, right? And she is, a lot of times she's like, I don't want to even hear it, right? I don't want to even hear it because it'll bring anxiety to her. That's not a comfortable place for her. She's not happy that way. But then from the company, she'll be collecting a paycheck and that's doing work for it. And that's where she is. So very, very much different personalities. But I'm a huge risk taker. I enjoy doing that, and that's the way I am.
What's your favorite part of business? So you said you've got a breadth, you've got legal, you've got computing, you've got sales and marketing, all these different points that you've had touch points with. What is what's your favorite bit of business?
A funny thing is I like long-term strategic planning. I like operations a lot. These are like really probably sounds very dry to people.
Well, no, it's interesting you find operations so interesting, because that's often the part that most people struggle with when they're an entrepreneur.
And that's part of why I like it. I like operations because of how much they can bring to a business, and when you don't do them right, how much they can hurt a business. And so all of the parts of the business are incredibly important. And we'll talk about it in a little bit if it comes up. It goes into one of my primary concepts about business. But operations, I like a lot. The funny thing is, here it is. I like marketing. I don't like sales. Okay. So, and maybe it's because I'm into figuring out what the market likes. Because to me, the most basic difference between marketing and sales is marketing is about the customer, sales is about you, right?
Right.
And I like that part of being about the customer, figuring out what they like and adjusting and doing things to the product and to the offerings, to various things in that way. And I'm not so into the sales part of it. That's not so much fun to me. And a lot of times when I go into companies, one of the things I notice is that they don't really understand what they're doing, how marketing and sales differ. And so you'll see even one company I went into, I was looking to actually invest in it. What happened was it was clear geographically inside the office space. I could tell, oh, geez, they don't really, the leadership really doesn't understand what marketing and sales is about because of the way that things were positioned inside the office. I immediately turned around and said, I turned to an assistant of mine and I said, there's a problem here. That's, we can work on it to fix it, but let's pay very good attention to this part of it. And it was very interesting that it was apparent to me just looking at the office space.
So was the sales and marketing? Yeah. Was there sales and marketing teams at different ends or something like that? Because that's what I'm visualizing on what you've said.
Wow, you picked it up. They were not just on different ends; they were diagonally on different ends, meaning they were the farthest point away from each other they could be. And then I was like, oh, geez, there's a problem here. And then when I got into it, I figured out, oh, geez, like you saw the different playbooks that they had and things like that. You saw that there was a complete lack of coordination and a lack of understanding of which is doing what. There were a lot of duties that were being placed in one department that shouldn't have been there. Wow. So it was both a lack of coordination and a sort of a mixture of what the duties were. So they were throwing things, they were mixing them up too much and not enough at the same time.
Right. Interesting. So your first book was The Small Business Guide to Surviving and Thriving in the COVID Era. So tell me a little bit about that, and then if you can talk about the second one you're writing at the moment.
Sure. Yeah. So COVID happened. Yes. And I started writing with a couple of my colleagues. I just said, why don't we just put together some, just like a little guides, a couple of things, because in my mind, wherever you think you are today with COVID, whether you think it's completely in your rearview mirror, whether you think you're in the thick of it, wherever you think you're in China, we're still dealing. Well, I mean, I guess they eased some of the restrictions. Wherever you are, it's a huge case study in a disruption that was completely unprecedented, and completely overwhelmingly over all industries, right? And so. What I wanted to sort of put together, because in my mind, the way I look at it, and we go back to how we started, the mindset, right? In my mind, whenever I look at a situation, I'm looking for where's the opportunity, right? You could have the worst situation, right? You had businesses in COVID that were very much, it was as if COVID, as a business thing, forget health stuff. Okay. So as a business thing, it was they were tailor made for it, right? The Amazons of the world.
Yep.
And by the way, they worked extremely hard to make that work, still, even though it was a good opportunity for them. And there were businesses that were, you just sat there and went like this for them, right? The restaurants of the world, right?
Yeah.
And so, but both sides of that ended up thriving. Not everybody, but some people did. And who did? It's the people that ended up having, seeing the opportunity and then exploiting that opportunity. So when COVID happened, my mindset wasn't the world is ending wherever I was sitting, right? And my mindset also wasn't the world is ending for restaurants. My mindset is, where's the opportunity for these industries? Because there's going to be something. Yeah. And so that caused me to say, okay, well, why don't I just start writing some guides? And I had a couple of friends. We started together, but we didn't finish together. I ended up doing the writing. So I started writing these guides, and then after a while, it got to be a lot of pages. So I marketed it, to get it published. That was something that just came to my mind, and maybe that was an opportunity I saw. It ended up growing out of how you deal with an unprecedented disruption or any disruption. And how you do certain things to tighten your belt, how you go look for opportunities, and then take advantage of them, and then and come out the other end, hopefully in better shape, but at least surviving. And so that became, it ended up hitting the Amazon bestseller list. So then I got into a second book as a result.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
In the second book, what I thought, I got asked to do it, so I did it. But I'll give you a quick bit of background about me. I always say I'm a generalist. Okay, so I've run every department of my businesses, but I also bring in leadership because at some point it requires very specific skills. But what that means to me is I have the attention span of a gerbil. I tell that to people all the time. So writing a book was a non-starter for me ever. So it was quite, again, by accident that I ended up writing the first one. The second one ended up being, oh, geez, I have all these things that I tell people all the time. Different little sayings that I have. So the working title, and I think it's going to be the final title, but the working title is, your product is not your business, but your business is your product. Okay. That's one of the things that I tell people. And so I started with that, and then added all these different concepts, and how they feed into the three major issues I see in sort of dealing with, talking with, mentoring, and partnering in thousands of small businesses, in various, again, it could be conversations, mentoring, or even being partners, right? Learning from that. The three major areas that I see small and medium-sized businesses having challenges. And those three areas are sales channels. Okay. It used to be, even 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the way you started a business, you went and opened up a store somewhere, and then, you picked a product, you had your geographical, area that you serviced, that was your market, and then you grew from there, right? That was the general, just again, speaking generalities. Today, the very first day you start a business, you have a variety of sales channels and a variety of audiences, a variety of markets. You could even go international if you want, right? Today, you could do that. So what ends up happening is the first challenge for small and medium-sized businesses is they overutilize and underutilize sales channels. That's the way I say it. And the way that they do that is they are on the wrong sales channels for their business for that time, and not enough on the right channels for their business for that time. They may be in too many channels, right? They need to say, okay, I shouldn't be in everything here. So that's one area that's a challenge for businesses, and it's become more and more of an issue. Then the other is small and medium-sized businesses tend to be very focused on new customer acquisition. And while new customer acquisition is incredibly important, it's not the only thing. So they do that at the expense of what a lot of big companies know is a very fruitful area for business, which is your current customers. Yeah. They don't have enough upsells, cross-sells, subscription programs, monthly recurring revenues. Going back to those customers, the customers who've trusted you to yeah. buy something from you, yeah. who are okay with you, who you have contact information for, you have direct relationship with, going to them and sort of providing further service to them.
So, Shawn, just what you're saying that I think it's really, really important for my listeners, and just giving a little bit about what I used to do. While working in corporate, I was doing sales and implementation of software. And one of the things that even for a big corporate, it was a large Big Four corporate, they were not cross-selling their product. They had really strong relationships with other companies, their clients. And one of the things that I was able to leverage and be quite successful in was actually cross-selling with other services, literally people on the other end of the floor that do something. Oh, actually, we could bring them in and be able to do X or Y service or product services that they were dealing with. Yeah. And the problem initially with some of those sorts of things is that you're all divided into teams, into departments, into areas, and sometimes you as having the relationship with that person, you bring someone in to cross-sell, you don't get the revenue. The other team gets the revenue. So it sometimes doesn't help that ability to cross-sell. So I think you're really important, from big companies down to small companies, the people you have relationships with. So thinking about small to medium businesses, the relationships that you have with people, and what I'm finding has been really successful with our current businesses is the people that you've got currently as clients, whether they renew or they decide to stop, asking them for referrals, actually speaking to them. Is there anyone else you know that might be interested in the services that we provide? And that then people go, oh, well, yeah, actually, I know John and he's doing something similar to me. He might want your services as well. So I think it's really, really important, and a really good lesson that you've just shared, and hopefully I've sort of elaborated on, is from whatever size business that you're talking about, your current clients are so important, because you can renew them and then keep on providing the product or service. But equally, they then know people that are in similar fields that probably need similar things to you.
They're one of your best sources of marketing, is what we're really saying, and it ends up being kind of a free source of marketing, or a very low cost source of marketing. And when a customer goes and recommends your product or service to another potential customer, that carries a lot more weight with that prospect than your words do. So. I mean, we all know that people look for social proof. People, talk about all of those things. And the funny thing is, when I said your product is not your business is your product. As consumers, we understand that concept, and I'll explain it to you very quickly. A lot of times, when you go to someone, you say, "Okay, what's your business?" They'll tell you the product they sell. That's it. If you go to a professional, they'll tell you, I do accounting, I blah, blah, blah. They consider that to be their business, the entire business. And that is not true. What is the entire product is everything you do. How your staff handles things, how your customer service is, what other products you have, what services you provide. And the funny thing is, as a consumer, how do you make decisions when you buy a product? You look at the company and you say, oh, yes, I like their product. But you know what? They're really good on returns. They have this really easy way of doing this. If something goes wrong with the product, I can call them up. Their customer service is like this, or I can, they'll call me right away with their chat box thing, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And so as a consumer, you look at all of those things that make up the company, and you look at all of them as in your decision to purchase whatever service or product from that company. The funny thing is, you go to the other side of it as a company, you suddenly lose complete focus. It's all about, okay, I'm selling this widget, and how do I make the best widget? And that's great. It's incredibly important how to make the best widget, right? But then you forget, you think everything else is a nothing. and you as a consumer that day, as you're constructing that widget and ignoring everything else as being the product you offer to the world, you will go that day to home and then make a decision on Amazon or whatever platform you're on shopping, or whatever store you walk into, and you make decisions based on the entire spectrum of factors. So, a lot of times as businesses, we don't see that. And so we don't see how important it is to deal with those customers that we already have, and what kind of brand ambassadors they are for our products.
So I was going to say an advocate or an ambassador is so important.
Yes.
Look, Shawn, we could go on for absolutely ages on this. And I would very much like to get you back on at a later stage to go into depth in other areas. It's been fascinating.
It would be my honor.
We are coming to the end of the interview. I ask the same 6 questions to all my guests. They're quick-fire questions. They need a relatively short question because I want to be respectful of your time. The first question is, what is the best decision that you made?
Best decision I made was never being an employee. For me, it's my personality. Okay, so and by no means it's not meant to be a put down on anyone. It's just my best decision.
What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
The most important piece of advice, maybe. Wow, geez. Okay. I'm a person who never quits. And again, going back to how I am, I will keep going at something, way after I should. And so the best piece of advice is know when to stop.
Oh, okay. You know when to stop. Right.
It's funny. It's like, be a go-getter. Every business show you go, be a go-getter. Go get through things. Yeah. We started it like that, and then I tell you the biggest is
I thought you were going to say persistence or sort of keeping going. Actually, the answer was know when to stop.
For me, okay, but for me, and I put that preface on it because I don't stop, and I can point to various things that have gone wrong for me, where the mistake I made was not changing directions, not saying this is not working. I need to change directions or just stop and go the other way. That's the reason I say it. By no means am I saying no one to stop to people. That's the wrong advice for just business.
It's interesting. A lot of entrepreneurs now know their exit before they've started, and a lot of people tell people that's one thing that you should be thinking of. I'm not 100% signed up to that. I think it works very well with the tech company, in the sense of you code everything in your garage or your bedroom, and the idea is that you're going to sell to an Oracle or a Google or a Facebook. But actually, in other businesses, it's not always the best. You can exit in the day-to-day activities, and you can let it run itself. But actually, exiting to sell, I think, sometimes is a sort of an overplay by certain gurus / influencers.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe in having that. By the way, I'm also one of those people that doesn't believe in putting something on paper and then getting someone else to, put up money so I can pay myself to do the thing that I put on paper.
Right.
That's not my style. I believe in, sort of having something going and being invested yourself in it.
Yeah.
And I think when you predetermine that you're going to exit at a certain point, you're really not. I think you're probably selling yourself short too. But I think that you're really not that invested in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
My dad, easily, and not because he's so good at business. It's some of those things, some of those events that will be in my book about experiences where my dad taught me something as a kid, as a teenager, and also in my adult years. And they were not, we keep going back to this. They were not, this kind of skill set or this, how to, they were not technical, but by far and away, my dad.
Amazing. Tell me about a regret that you have.
It goes back to the best piece of advice I had. Is one of the biggest crisis situations I had was because of exactly that, is not knowing when to stop and continuing to try to make something work and not changing directions on one of my businesses, which caused the business to fail. So that's regretful because I believe that I always the buck always stops with me in my life. That's the way I think, because I believe that I could make changes in myself, or I could have done something differently. That's the only thing I can control is myself, right? Yeah. I can't completely control everything else. I can completely control myself. And so the buck has to stop with me because that's the place I have the most control.
Yeah.
And so so I believe that with that business, I could have done things differently, and I didn't do them right to avoid a bad situation. And so that was my biggest regret.
Thank you for your honesty. What are you most proud of?
Well, I was never. I was never one to desire kids, but I'm most proud of my kids. I ended up having 4 of them.
4 of them. You didn't want any, and you've got 4.
I tell this to people.
Shawn, did you know when to stop?
I did not. If you asked me as a kid, hey, look, are you going to have a family? I would have assumed I would have had a family because my parents, had kids. But never was it like something that was in my head. And I end up having 4 daughters, and I think I'm most proud of them.
Amazing. What does legacy mean to you?
Legacy, I mean, it's what lives on, right? In my mind. So a lot of times people look at their kids as their legacy because that's part of them that lives on. I think that's something that kind of naturally happens. I think you have to do a little bit more than that. So write a book. No, I mean, I think something more than that is something that means a legacy to me, and it doesn't have to be much. It doesn't have to be some, something that people celebrate. You don't have to be an Edison in the world to have a legacy, Yeah. And so that's,
I always think it's a little bit about being remembered and having an impact on people's lives. So both my parents have passed away quite young, but their legacy lives in me, and they live in my kids to an extent as well, because they remembered them as well. So I always think like
that's the other side of it. Yeah. That's looking at it from the other direction. Yeah. So, no, it's absolutely true. I agree with that.
And you've probably impacted so many people with mentoring, with working with them, sharing your knowledge, sharing your experiences with people in the businesses that you've worked for. That's your legacy as well.
Well, I mean, that's part of it, right? Hopefully, you as you go along, you'll develop more of them, more of things like that. But it's part of what I like doing. That part of it is because of that. There are people that I helped out 20 years ago that come to me now and say something to me that about how that impacted their lives. That really means something. So making a difference in someone's life for the better is incredibly important.
Absolutely. And lastly, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Oh, that's an easy question. Okay. So you can go to connectwithshawn.com. I made it easy. Shawn, SHAWN. Or my company, eplaybooks.com. And you can connect with me. By the way, anyone in your audience that reaches out to me, I'm happy to provide them with a free copy of my book.
Oh, amazing. So if you can provide me with the details of, I know you've just told me, so I can add them to the show notes, but people can find you through those links, and then if they want to reach out to you, then they can reach out that way.
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn too. But connectwithshawn.com or eplaybooks, as in Edward, playbooks with an S at the end.com. And you should be able to navigate right through there pretty easily to get to contact me. And then I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Shawn. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely fascinating. Definitely going to get you back on again in a few months' time. We can talk about some of these areas which we never got time to, but it's been a great conversation. I've really thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Well, same here. I'm really glad that you had me on, and I'm looking forward to being on again. As you can see, I can talk forever.
Thank you.